Baer, Josh Baer, at Sotheby's with global chairwoman Mari-Claudia Jiménez. We're going to talk about art, NFTs, business development, how to get me this car for only $42,000. Let's go. So MC, the structure of the departments is quite unusual at Sotheby's. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what your role is?
Yep, so Brooke Lampley and I are actually the co-heads of the Global Fine Arts Division, but we have distinct titles within that structure. So my role is worldwide head of business development as well as managing director, and she's head of sales.
So what does that really mean?
So what it basically means is Brooke is a specialist, and so she leads with that knowledge. I am a lawyer and a business person, so that is my perspective in terms of how I lead my side of the organization.
But it must flip-flop occasionally where you have to really weigh in an art way,
Absolutely.
And she has to nail it in a business way, right?
100%, and that's why we have a really strong partnership where we basically are constantly working together with the same mind on things, because otherwise it wouldn't work. We're basically yin and yang, two sides of the same brain.
So 1 + 1 = 3 is sort of the 2.5?
2.5.
2.5,
yeah.
Which one's the half? But we'll see. And your experience as an art lawyer, which you did first.
Yes.
How does that help you now or hurt you? Tell us about that development.
That was the first part of my life, my career. I spent 13 years as an art lawyer, and when I was an art lawyer, I spent a lot of time as the client, because I would come to auction houses with clients who were selling significant collections. We would do the whole, dog and pony show with all of the auction houses and help the clients evaluate what was the better deal and which was the best choice for them. So that perspective as a client has really been very instrumental to how I do my job now, because I'm constantly thinking about what swayed me, what worked with me, what resonated, and what are the important points that I think sometimes we lose when we're so focused on just the art.
I would say now maybe 100% of the evening sales involves lawyers and negotiations like that. When you started was what, 10% of the deals?
Probably,
that way?
Yeah. I mean, I'd say that was the exception rather than the rule, and now it's gotten to the point where there's either an advisor or an art lawyer in virtually every evening sale deal.
And why the change, you think?
I think that the stakes have gotten so much higher. We're talking about such exponentially higher prices than there were even 10, 15 years ago, that clients, when you're talking about a $50 million, $60, $70, $100 million deal, don't feel like they can spare any expense. They really need to be thoughtful about having every possible perspective as they embark on this. And it's a lot less about, just trusting the person that you're working with and making sure that every, I is dotted and every T is crossed.
Well, $50,000 on a $250,000 sale and legal fees is different than $50,000 on a $20 million work of art. So the economics.
Absolutely. I mean, when I was working as a lawyer, when people would come to me with $1 million painting or consignment, I would say to them, I'm probably not the best person for you. You should probably either do this on your own or go to another lawyer who perhaps charges less, because it just doesn't make sense if it's not an expensive enough deal.
And have the parameters of the deals changed in terms of the legal structure?
The legal structure hasn't changed, but they have gotten more complicated in terms of the kinds of things that people are looking for, the kinds of risks people are looking to protect against. I think clients are much more risk averse because of the stakes and the prices involved. So there are all sorts of, kind of different clauses and machinations involved now that perhaps weren't the norm or standard, to even 10, 15 years ago.
Unfortunately, 1031s are gone.
Yes, long gone.
That was a great part of the art business.
Absolutely, it drove a lot of churn, frankly.
And now, where do you see it? The economy's funny, all these kinds of things. Do you see a change coming now? You're saying that they're risk averse. I'm guessing that the appetite for guarantees is not yet started too strongly from any of the auction houses from November?
It hasn't changed as far as we're concerned. We're still very happy to guarantee works. I think we are as entrepreneurial a company as we ever have been, and I think that's really the way we view it. We're sort of part of the risk taking. We're taking an opportunity and looking at it in a, as a possibility for us to make money for the client, but also to make money for the house. So
it's an interesting point as an opportunity, because I'm not sure the competitors are willing to write guarantees. It's now late June for November, waiting to see how things settle. So if you're willing to do that risk, you might get someplace first.
Absolutely.
Is that part of the the strategy at the moment?
Without question. I think that, like I said, we have new ownership that is really excited about partnering with clients on things and really being part of the business and taking risks. And that's just part of how
So
we do
have
it.
you already signed things up, not that you can necessarily tell them as yet, for November, for the fall, that might have been a competitive situation, and because you were willing to jump in guarantee-wise?
It's possible. We may have embarked on some strategy like that.
And it seems to most people counterintuitive how strong the art market's been since the start of the war in Ukraine and Wall Street dropping 20%. What's your perception of that?
I think we continually see a lag and sort of a disassociation between the market and the art market, because people are continuing to look at art not just as a passion purchase, but also as a way to diversify their assets. So when Wall Street is going down, art stays relatively steady by comparison. It may not go up as high perhaps as the market does, but it also doesn't dip quite as low. A Picasso is never going to go from being worth 50 million to zero. And you do see that obviously with Bitcoin and some of the stocks that we're seeing that have taken precipitous drops.
But your liquidity could go to zero.
Well, that's when it catches up, right? So I think what we typically see is there's a disassociation, and then there's a 6 to 12 month lag, and then when liquidity starts being affected and people don't have the cash to buy art, then the art market starts to dip in connection with the stock market.
So you're aware that corrections have always come, but trying to time it is difficult.
Exactly. And sometimes the market quickly bounces back up, and then there never is an art market lag.
So in terms of business development, how much of that is data driven and how much of that is history, art specialist driven, and are you highly involved in the data side of it?
It's both. It really is. And it's something that we are really focusing more and more on. We're looking to grow our client pool in a much more sort of organic way than I think we ever have before.
What does that mean, an organic way of growing clients?
Really looking at what they're buying and trying to sort of bring the art to them. So we're doing that by bringing art to people in their locations where they were summering during COVID, for example, opening galleries in East Hampton, in Palm Beach, in Aspen. So bringing art to the people is one way of doing it. But another way of doing it is really thinking of art as just sort of another way that our clients live with their assets, and sort of presenting them with things in different contexts. So the way we've changed our classifications of our sales, it's not so strictly impressionist and modern, contemporary. It's more about sort of how people are living with things.
So you're tracking how many Modigliani bidders bid on Richter?
Absolutely. That kind of cross-pollination is incredibly, absolutely, it's incredibly important. And we're seeing more and more of that. And you have for every one of our sales, we've got approximately 40% new clientele. That's a huge number. And that's an incredible amount of people that are now suddenly introduced to Sotheby's, who we need to learn about and basically expand their reach.
Well, 10 years ago, I think the database of the major auction houses was somewhere around 100,000 people.
Yep.
Is it more like 1 million now?
It's definitely up there. It's growing, like I said, exponentially during COVID, because we got a whole new slew of clients who had never thought to buy with us before. And I think that the online features that we were able to sort of master during the COVID period made it that we were much more democratic. We were able to reach a large number of people that never thought to buy in an auction house.
Do you see an age thing, that under 40, they don't need to see it in person, and over 40, they're not bidding unless they've seen it in person? Or does it not work that way?
Not necessarily.
Is it geographic? Is it by age? Is it by dollar?
It has to do a lot with the type of relationship. Seeing it or not seeing it has a lot to do with the type of relationship that a client has with the specialist that they work with, the relationship manager they work with. If they trust them implicitly, they will trust their taste, and they won't necessarily feel like they need to see it in person. And they will trust that the condition is appropriate, etc. Younger people, I don't know that they necessarily have to see things in person, but they're buying different kinds of things. So 20% of the buyers in our sales this season were under 40. So that's an interesting statistic, because you don't usually think of people buying in, high-end art as being young. But the demographics are changing.
But the entry point for people used to be prints, and then drawings,
right,
and then paintings. Now the entry point might be, oh, I've never looked at an artwork, I'll buy an Agnes Martin painting for $5 million.
For sure. And they're also, the entry point is sneakers, or a handbag, or something that's much more of a luxury good or a daily use good.
Let's talk about luxury goods a little bit. We're standing in a part of Sotheby's that's sort of like, jewelry, sneakers. I think those are my dunks, but and I have I need those two because
You have a few Birkins?
I don't have them in those colors. So to what extent have the auction houses become luxury goods companies? And is that a good perception, a sort of a neutral perception, a pejorative in some worlds? How do you balance that sense?
We're looking to offer our clients all of the things that they want to buy. And that's not just art, right? They live with things that go beyond art. They buy wine, they buy cars, they buy handbags, they buy jewelry, they buy watches. So we're trying to be sort of an all-service, one-stop luxury destination for them. And I think that, things like handbags are actually a bit, and watches, for example, have proved to be for us a bit of a gateway into the bigger Sotheby's, because these are things that they wouldn't necessarily know to buy at Sotheby's. They find them here.
So Birkin is kind of weed. It's the gateway drug.
Absolutely, the Birkin is the new gateway drug.
You go from the gateway drug. And then you wind up at Picasso.
Yeah, you buy a $20,000 Birkin, and then the next step is, you start looking at like a good watch, and then from there you go to a Picasso print, and then you go on to something bigger.
But is that the algorithm that's contacting those people saying, hey, if you like Birkins, you'll like, Rothko?
It is, but it's really mostly our specialists. So all of our specialists are basically trained to think bigger than just their particular category. Our relationship managers obviously have specialty areas in which they focus, but they also think about the broader Sotheby's ecosystem. So when they're talking to a client and they figure out that maybe it would actually make sense for them to talk to them about watches or handbags or prints or sculptures, they kind of are already thinking that when they see the first purchase that client makes.
Is that sort of in your realm as business development more than the way that traditional art or jewelry specialists have thought?
Absolutely. It's one of the main things that we do in business development.
The
I think that there's a little bit of tension occasionally because especially amongst people who have been at Sotheby's for a long time, there is a reliance on tradition and on the idea of this is how I always have worked with clients and this is how I've always done this. And it's always been a very trusting handshake kind of business. But that's changed and evolved yet again because of how expensive things have gotten. And I think that people have trended to be more competitive perhaps in the way that they work with auction houses than they were in the past, where they may have just been a one auction house person. And I think that looking at statistics and data and how clients transact is really important to be able to sort of predict future client interactions.
That was sort of the old client services person who will help you with your watch and your painting, and they would try to sort of guard them as theirs.
Yeah.
Is there the person buying this for the expert here is trying to hang on to them and maybe give them advice about art that maybe they don't know so much about, and vice versa?
Yeah, I mean, we work as a team. So all of our clients are handled in a real team way. So
but not everybody is the same team player.
Not everybody is the same team player, but I do think that part of our culture is to really constantly think of what's best for the client and how to provide that client with the best experience. And if you know a lot about handbags, but you don't know anything about Picassos, then you'll bring in your colleague who is a Picasso specialist to be able to complement all of the things that client needs and wants.
So what's the upper end? Sotheby's is doing what? 5 billion, 6 billion a year or something. Can it be 50?
I think we'd love that.
I mean, how far can luxury extend?
We're trying to push all of the traditional categories to new levels, and luxury and handbags and sneakers and all of these kinds of things is obviously a new venture for us. So we're excited to grow the things that are new, but we're also excited to evolve the things that are traditional. So old masters, decorative arts, Chinese works of art, these are all incredibly traditional sort of categories that you think of when you think of 19th century collectors. How do we make them applicable and resonate with a 21st century collector? And that's how we're thinking about growing our clientele and growing our business.
And how big do you see the NFT world as being part of it? I mean, it's sinking,
yeah.
Crypto's sinking. The actual pool of buyers may be much smaller than we believe, but some people see that as the future.
I mean, I think that we're seeing, again, crypto evolve. It's less of a sort of just dive and more of a, focus on volume rather than on value.
It's on crypto or NFTs?
Sorry, NFTs.
You might want to say that
Yeah.
again.
So what I think we're seeing is NFTs evolving. They are not necessarily the $69 million Beeple anymore. They're more about volume. It's more about the natively digital works and how many works you're selling, and less about the one star work that ends up selling for many, many, many millions.
But the volume is sort of circulating back and forward. I think the average hold time is 30 days.
Yeah, I mean,
it's like bro to bro to bro to bro to bro to bro. It's like the old joke of how we did $20 million worth of business. It's all the same thing back and forward.
Pretty much.
pretty much.
Yeah.
And do you see women coming into that area?
We have seen some women. I mean, I think it's still primarily a male-dominated area, as Bitcoin is as well, and all of crypto is. But I think we are seeing an increasing number of women who have begun to dabble in it. But again, it's, at this moment, it's obviously an unstable moment given the situation with the crypto market.
Well, that makes me ask, a number of my clients, personal clients, are women around 50, mostly in finance, and they have a different way of looking to collect art. What's your experience of the diversity of collectors, whether they're of color, they're women, they're interested in queer art? Have you seen a really fundamental change in who's buying contemporary and modern art?
I think that when we're seeing new populations come in, whether it be, people of color, women, larger numbers of women, they're buying things that resonate very distinctly to them. So in our Now sale, almost 50% of the artists represented were artists of color. And those things did particularly well, and they of course had a number of artists, of clients who were very interested in supporting those particular artists of color. So I think that you're not seeing a lot of women coming here and buying, dead old white men. I think they're looking to things like Anna Wyant or artists who are speaking to things that really resonate to them.
I think once we get from the bottom up more staff members that are of color, that'll change the dynamic, because the workforce is 98% white at the ecosystem of the galleries and the auction houses. Is there a concerted effort to how do we hire here to look a different way?
Absolutely. We've just established, internship programs and associate programs where we've made a really concerted effort to make sure that at least 20 to 30% of those programs are populated by people of color. And it's been really exciting to see a diversification of the types of people who are working at Sotheby's. So I think that that's something that we're trying to build from the bottom up. So you start them young, you start them as interns, and then that will be the specialist of the future, or the relationship manager of the future.
I think that's where the dynamics will change also in the market, from those people rising, getting opportunities that they didn't all go to Yale and their mom and dad weren't clients. I mean, that was the traditional way in, right?
Absolutely. I think it's a really good point. They're going to, much like the way that buyers are buying today, going to want to bring in art that really speaks to the realities that they understand, grew up with, connect with.
So is that what's driving the contemporary market at the moment? Is it overheated? Is it like any artist of color? I don't think so. I don't think that the fact that way.
Well, everything we sell in our Now sales is at the highest level of quality, and it's exactly the kind of work that we believe is representative of Sotheby's and our clients.
Do you think auction houses should be selling works in 2022, made in 2022?
Yeah, I think that's a challenging question. I don't think that auction houses necessarily need to replace the role of galleries in terms of the primary market, but I do think that auction houses fill a void of giving access to people that perhaps some of the galleries aren't providing. And so I think that there is a place for the gallery to sell work that's contemporary, very contemporary.
Wouldn't Sotheby's like to be a primary market as well?
I think that we really aren't interested in being a primary market, but I think we're very much interested in working alongside the primary market, because it is together as part of this sort of art ecosystem that we are making sure that artists are seen, viewed, appreciated, and those artists grow.
Because you're already, between you and the other auction houses, probably the biggest art galleries in the world by sales.
Certainly private sales. I mean, we're selling consistently over $1 billion in private sales every year, which makes us a pretty big player as far as private sales are concerned. But we're not just selling primary market works, we're primarily selling secondary market works. So,
well, I think when Art Agency was here, there was a sense of representing estates and artists. So there was a different feeling there when Alan was here. Has that desire diminished a little bit or changed?
I mean, we work with the estate of Christo to, sell a number of works that related to the Arc de Triomphe that was, happened over the fall of last year. So we have absolutely continued to work with artists, estates on, projects like their legacies. But I don't know that it's something that we are necessarily, putting front and center. It's absolutely part of the panoply of options.
But you were saying we're trying to do everything and grow. I mean, how big can the pie get? How voracious can the megas be to swallow up everything underneath it?
We can be a master of a lot of trades, and I think that we can do a lot of things exceptionally well because our size, our scale, and our resources as an auction house, have a really broad reach that a lot of galleries don't have. But it doesn't mean that galleries shouldn't exist and shouldn't be equally playing in this.
So what don't you do so well? Or could you do better?
That's a hard question. I don't know. I think, the things that we do really well are telling stories. We have an exceptional marketing department that allows us to really tell the story of the things that we're selling. I don't know that galleries do that quite as well as we do. I think that we are able to sort of maximize the opportunity of a sale because we're able to really, get into the videos, the catalogs, all of the additional collateral that allows you to kind of live in the moment of that artwork. I don't know that we are necessarily the right place to, be a primary source of sale for an artist's work. Like I wouldn't have a brand new artist come to Sotheby's to try to sell for the first time. I don't think we do that very well.
I think the hardest part is that when something's going on, you're talking to a client every day for 6 months, then the sale comes and it's like, bye. Whereas if you're representing an artist or an advisor working with that client, it's 7/24, 365 with those people. So sort of the turnover of moving in and out of people's lives and businesses.
Well, I think we have a pretty close relationship with our clients. I mean, all of our relationship managers have relationships that they've had for decades. So I think that we don't just think of people as like one consignment type of clients. We think of them in their evolution as collectors, from the time they started collecting 25 years ago to where they are now, perhaps, starting to sell things from their collection. So I don't think that we would.
I'm still trying to get to what can we expect from you guys in a positive sense of what you could do better as part of what is in your umbrella.
I think one of the things that we could do better and we're continuing to work on is this cross-pollination of sales and sale categories. So how do we get a client to think about themselves not just as a collector of impressionist works or contemporary works or watches, but as a collector, period, full stop, who is then open to buying all sorts of different things. And that's one of our big goals, is to try to combine, sales that have different themes that allow you to sort of think of works out of context. A collector of 20th century design may not realize that they would love to buy Chinese furniture because it's the same minimalist aesthetic. We've had collectors who, just by virtue of being introduced to something in an exhibition, by walking through it, have bought things they never dreamed that they would ever want to buy. And I think it's that kind of constant evolution of how do you make someone think beyond what they traditionally buy and just think bigger.
I think the challenge, I think you're right, is to see beyond the data.
Yeah.
And the challenge is, you have all this data, is how to analyze the data and humanize the data and have them not be data points.
Right, humanizing the data is key. It's about thinking about the fact that all of these statistics are incredibly helpful, but at the end of the day, these are people and they act like people. So we, as relationship managers and specialists and people who are working with, people, need to think the way that they would think about something.
You mean the Sotheby's data center's not working as complete AI, like a human being thinking like that? I'm thinking like Tobias in the machine upstairs. Its code name is Tobias Meyer, and that's what they call the computer system. And it thinks like Tobias. It's got an accent. It's got a vantage point, right? That's the future?
No, that is not the future. But we definitely do believe that AI is a helpful tool in our arsenal to be able to crunch that data and better know the humans that are our clients.
Tell me more.
So we, a number of years ago, bought a company called Thread Genius. And that was a company that was founded by the guys who created the algorithm for Spotify that was, if you like this, then you'd like this.
I thought that was artsy.
So they ended up creating this wonderful data lake, so to speak, which is essentially a collection of information about all of our clients that allows us to get to know their taste profiles and what they would buy, perhaps based on what they own. And that kind of information is always helpful when our specialists are thinking about ways to diversify what their clients might be interested in.
So have they modeled it, and a different group says, here's what I predict they're going to be interested in this sale, and match to see if their predictive models are correct?
Yes. So we've done a lot of work with that. In many cases, they are not correct, but in an increasing number of cases, they are more and more accurate, because as we get the predictions, we have to tell the machine, no, this actually is not correct. They're not interested. And then the more information they learn, the more intelligent the machine becomes. So they're more accurate the next time around. But we've had clients who we've sent things to that we really didn't expect that they would like them. We just thought, okay, we're going to do this on the lark. And the client came back and said, wow, this is actually fascinating. I really am into this thing you sent. I'm going to bid.
But it's like tracking with sort of a linear regression model, more parameters in to sort of predict where they might go.
Exactly.
And get the actual data where they went, and then it keeps getting better and better. So eventually, maybe the machines do take over.
I hope not. Certainly our specialists hope not.
No.